Sangha, could I ask you to keep an eye on the chat, and if something happens in it that needs to come to the audiovisual part of this, let me know. Sometimes during the middle of this, it's hard to see that something's happening in the chat window. Welcome, everyone. People are still joining. We'll give people a few minutes to finish getting connected through the Medico client. As usual, these sessions are recorded. The recording will be posted to YouTube. We would like as many people as are willing to share video, like for this to be like an in the room meeting with each other. We don't run a queue. If you have something to say, just jump in. If the conversation gets too lively for that, then we'll institute a queue mechanism. But usually we have no problem with floor control with people just using normal voice cues. All right, the join rate is slowing down. I've received messages from a few people that they would be joining into the meeting far enough in that waiting for them isn't what we should do. So I think I'd like to go ahead and get started. I will repeat again for those that just joined. The session is being recorded and will appear on YouTube later. The agenda has been available. Everyone has a link to the notes page. The outline of the notes page serves as our agenda. There is a link in the chat already. If you don't have the notes page available to you already, please follow that link. Does anybody have any agenda bashes? Anything like to change or reprioritize in our discussion? Not hearing anything. I'll jump in with the thing that is consuming the tools team the most at the moment, the infrastructure transition is still underway. We worked very heavily through the month of May. The Mailman 3 transition consumed several of us as we were recovering from messages that weren't delivered as soon as they should have been to the mail lists. That's been worked out. We've moved a few more of the applications across into the new infrastructure area. Of note, the RC Production Center's working machine has been moved into DigitalOcean. And the older IAOC website, which is now just a flat set of HTML pages, is being served directly out of a blob store at R2. Nothing other than Cloudflare is involved in serving that website at this point. We have a great deal of effort underway preparing for moving the cluster of applications that are bound together by the file system They need to move at roughly the same time in close coordination. That is the primary website, www.ietf.org, mostly because of the parts of the website that are not the Wagtail managed content management system, but the parts that are directories on the file system that are just exposed raw. The data tracker itself, the mail archive, the IMAP server, and the rsync server all feed on this shared set of file systems. So there are notes here for roughly where we are and roughly what's blocking us. We do have a version of the www website up in staging at this point. It's a matter of just knocking off a few details, and I think that will be ready to go. Kazar, do you have anything to add to that? Yeah. The mail archive is, would say, 95% there. We're working out details and staging on authentication and some cores issues. The last I heard from the team, there were still some struggles getting Elasticsearch to behave. Are we still pushing through that, or has that been wrestled through completely?
Still working on that.
All right. Yeah, but our goal is to feel comfortable with that towards the end, towards the end of tomorrow, the middle of the week. One of our big stumbling blocks is getting messages from the mail processing system when things arrive at a mailing list address. How does it get from the mail system into the mail archive when the mail archive is no longer on the same machine as the mail system? For the previous many, many years, what happens is the mailman would deliver via pipe to a script. The script would handle things locally on the file system that was present, taking a lot of advantage of the economy of everything being on a single machine. There's development for Mailman underway that Steve at Sirius is completing to add an archiver to the archiver plugin for Mailman that will take the messages and post them to the Mail Archive's new API for ingesting messages over HTTP. Jennifer has written a similar service that will run next to the Mail Archive that will accept messages intended for the data tracker over an LMTP interface and then post them to the data tracker's API for ingesting messages. We're also working on reducing the number of ways that email can get into the data tracker. I'm talking with Ayanna, for example, about changing the one place that they are sending email to the data tracker and replacing it with just a post. But we're likely to have emails sent to the nomcom being digested by the data tracker for the long foreseeable future. And we have the last of the details associated with managing those common files, parts of the file system between the website, the data tracker, and the mail archive that have been spread across cron jobs in several places on the existing machine. That we're investigating and moving the things that those cron jobs did into appropriate places to work in this new environment. Some of these are quite messy. They're related to our decades of deciding to serve things in different ways in multiple places. When we went through the exercise of shutting down the FTP server, we created directory on the web server under everything FTP that had files that were already served by the web server, but in a different structure, just to match the structure of what was at the FTP server. For a while we were actually keeping the FTP server, there were things on the file system that ended up getting used by the rsync service that are duplications. So short answer, whenever the data tracker puts a file on disk, it has been now changed to put that file onto disk in 4 places that it can know about. And there are a few places where scripts move things into a 5th or 6th place that are being taken care of by these cron jobs. And untangling this so that we have a smooth transition and making sure that we've covered everything is been quite an effort, but we are close to the end of it. So after that long description, assuming that we don't run into blockers in those remaining points or discover something entirely new with the testing that we'll be doing the rest of the week, it's our intent to move this set of applications into our infrastructure at DigitalOcean early in the week next week. Our current target is to do this on Monday. It will involve significant downtime. I don't yet know what significant means, but I suspect that it is still going to be measured in hours, not tens of minutes, because of the time that it takes to do the final syncs of the file system and the few databases that we have to move over that are still slow loading databases. So we will be working towards building an estimate on what that downtime would actually be later this week. Now, I would prefer to give the community much more notice than a few days for the data tracker is going to be down for a couple of hours. But I don't think that we need to trade that off against the available time. We have a deadline to get these things moved by the end of June. We need to move these. Go ahead.
Robert, this is Liz. Will that affect me working on the agenda? Because Monday is going to be the day that I'm really jamming on the meeting agenda.
Yes, it will. For the time that we're doing this transition, you won't be able to work.
Okay.
So the moving these things is a precondition towards moving the actual mail processing system itself. We're looking for an update from Sirius on their current plans, but the expectation is that they would be moving that system the next week, which is the last week of June, and that we would be off of IETFA at the end of June. You'll note at the end of this, we'll also be moving the registration system independently. We'll temporarily be moving it to a droplet in DigitalOcean and then converting it to run in our Kubernetes cluster afterwards. So feedback, Roman, from the ISG's perspective, and Eric, I see you're here too. The short notice to the community, the effect this might have on scheduling. We're up against the wall on the needing to move off of IETFA. Are the trade-offs acceptable to you?
So I want to repeat what's being proposed here. So we're saying that it is now Tuesday. We're going to give 3 business days notice to the community that likely for a couple hours, let's round up a half day on this coming Monday, you can't use the data tracker.
Sure.
And the alternative of waiting another week is that does not give us sufficient pad if something goes horrifically bad to meet the end of the month deadline.
Correct.
And I lost the bubble. The end of the month deadline comes from what?
It's not just the end of the month deadline. It's then the knock-on effect of the moving into IETF 120 as well. So it's the two things stack up, because if we can't do it, then we then need to go into July. We can't potentially do it in July because of 120. We're then into August as well, doing it by the end of that. And it's so it's partly timing because of avoiding any disruption to that, and partly budget because of the extensive cost to us each month that we delay it by, and we've delayed it 3 months now already.
So if I hear you, this isn't really a question, like we have to do this, or there's substantial kind of costs. I mean, it'd be based on how the schedule has been constructed. You know, we do this now, or we do this in August for a bunch more money.
Yes, probably.
Okay, so again, I guess I'm not sure what the question is being directed.
Yeah, there isn't. Yeah,
it sounds like we're giving the community.
Right, there isn't really. No, the question is, this is what we're planning to do. Do you object, really? It's that way around. Do you want us to try and do something different? Are we simply skirting too close to the wind with this one?
I'm not really being presented with an alternative, a palatable alternative otherwise. So I guess I have to say yes to that based on how we plan this schedule.
All right, I understand.
Right. You're asking me to kind of concur to something for which there is no kind of option. And so we're doing this anyway, and we have to manage do the damage control that we're giving the community less than a week, that we're going to have a half day downtime, which strikes me as a ton.
Yeah. So a couple of things. First of all, the whole project has been very, very difficult. And I think, as you can understand from the details that Robert has gone through, the level of I don't know if the word translates, but the level of cruft that has been found is extraordinary, and the amount of work that is required to do this has been significant. We effectively need to bite the bullet to push through and get this done at this time. There is something has to give in terms of the way to do it. We've given already on money by extending it for some months. We've given already on some of the technology choices, and now it's a bit of time in terms of the community notice that we need to give on this. It's unfortunate, but it won't be. This is the really big one after like decades of us doing something different, and so after this, I'm confident that we're going to end up in a very, very different position.
I understand. We've been in the we have to bite the bullet kind of argument now several times now through some very rocky kind of transitions. So
you're right.
There's nothing being presented as an alternative. So we clearly have to do it and kind of manage that community expectation. And yeah, I mean, there's not much to kind of do here.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I realize this is not.
No, as a data tracker user, right? So 3-day notice, and knowing that data tracker will be down, let's say, half a day, as long as we are sure it's back after either the old position or the new position, and the half a day doesn't extend to 1 full day, I think it's manageable, right? So it's not perfect, for sure, but it's manageable. So the intent is to send the advice today, right?
Yep.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
The thing is that we've got testing that we've got to do through the rest of the week, and if we find a blocker, it would end up necessarily bumping to later in the week.
Understood.
Wait, no,
now,
I don't understand. I'm sorry.
Neither.
Our plan is to do the let me restate, is to do this transition Monday. It's conditional on the testing that we're doing the rest of the week. If we find that we cannot do it on Monday, we would be pushing it further into next week to do the transition, to give us time to address the issues that we find in our testing the rest of this week.
Now, a moving target is always annoying, right? Again, so why not saying no, Thursday, because you got a telechat and we need it, but next Friday, and be sure to be that, right? So simply, rather than having something which is it's next Monday, most probably, and then on Friday say no, finally it will be next Wednesday, and living in kind of doubts and unknown. Why not saying it's clearly next Friday? It gives you enough time, right, to do the testing.
Well, because of the knock-on effects of the delay, because we've got to move and then have some infrastructure work that we do to prepare for the next thing that has to move, which is the mail processing infrastructure that has to happen during that week, the next week.
Well, Friday, well, I understand this isn't meant to be a negotiation, this is meant to be planned, but it does feel as if Wednesday might be better. Then that gives 2 extra days to sort anything out, 2 extra days for notice, and 2 less days for anything that goes forward. And we can be much firmer about Wednesday as the planned day then.
Yeah, I mean, I said Friday just to avoid Thursday.
Yes.
Wednesday will be perfect as well, right? Clearly.
And, as Liz is pointing out, we hit the endpoints of her work on the agenda. We disrupt her the most. Mary also called out in the chat that the further we are from the draft deadline, the better.
Right, which is July 8th, I believe.
I also want to point out that sometime eventually going to affect some scheduled interim meetings.
Yep. So you broke up fairly badly, Cindy, but your point was that we're going to affect scheduled interim meetings and we would have to work our downtime around those. So which we necessarily would. All right.
So what's the result here? Back to kind of what Eric is proposing, can we, if we go on Wednesday, we have a lot of confidence because we have 2 days pad and a little bit more notice that we're going to go that day? Or are we saying that we really need to do it on kind of Monday, even if we slip it to Tuesday or Wednesday, because that buys us 2 more days and the schedule is so tight now that if, 2 days makes a difference between hitting the face-to-face meeting or not?
Well,
yeah, I don't have the IMS.
I'm comfortable with announcing Wednesday and doing this work on that Wednesday. I think we can still adjust for the knock-on effects that would have on what will happen with the mail processing system itself.
So is that all agreed then that we're going to go for Wednesday? And we're going to ask the interims to switch to WebEx, as suggested by Miria, so that there's no authentication issues with data tracker being down.
Well, we'll just have to work around the interims even then, Jay, and we'll look at the times and we'll make sure that the data tracker point happens after, because it's not just Metaco, it's notes.ietf.org.
But the interims last for 7 hours on Wednesday. So either we switch them to WebEx and tell them that the other things are down and on the mechanism, or we can't.
Yeah. Oh, Moke is doing the full day. That's and they're doing a full day on that Tuesday as well.
Okay, well, we'll need to look at this later.
Really, I think that we would be disrupting those meetings dramatically if the data tracker weren't available. I mean, they would want to be submitting drafts. They would want to be, while they were working, looking at the state of things in data tracker. So I think that what I'm hearing from this is if we don't go on Monday, we need to go on Thursday after the telechat.
I think that's right.
So should we just schedule Thursday after the telechat then?
I think we should do that if we can accommodate that.
Yep.
All right. Eric, I think you tried to say something, but you were muted.
Indeed, and you cannot read on my lips, Robert. Shame on you. More seriously, after the telechat, we have the IEEE IETF coordination call, if not mistaken. And I'm not sure on which system it relies.
I was just looking at that, and we're currently set up for Medico from noon to 2 Eastern. We can move that, I think, Cindy, don't you?
You mean move it away from Iteco to WebEx or Zoom or whatever?
Yeah, we can go to WebEx because we don't use notes and all those other things. Cindy just disappeared. I'll coordinate with her to get a new meeting announcement out. That gives you a whole bunch of hours back, Robert.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like anything else is scheduled Thursday after the telechat, except.
And basically, Cindy said the IETF meeting is already set up in WebEx.
Yeah, there's a comms, the LLC comms meeting that Greg has.
We can move it.
And indeed, the IEEE is this week and not next week. So forget about my comment, sorry.
Oh, you're right. I was looking at the wrong week too. Yeah. But no, wait, is the telechat's this week? The telechat's this week.
No, there's a farmer telechat next week as well.
Ah.
Shall we move on then to next bit on the agenda?
Yep. Following the tools retreat that we had, Roman has asked that we find a way to check that we are getting feedback from more of the community than what is attending these calls. The set of priorities we have at the roadmap, which is linked at the very top of the notes, is informed by the feedback from these calls and from what we hear from individuals reporting issues and discussions that are happening on mailing lists. But what we've heard is it would be, if it's possible, useful to vet these priorities and get more community feedback, get broader community feedback than we're currently getting if we can. Nick points out that with the Wiki.js community, he's been using a service called, I don't know if it's pronounced Canny or Canny, .io, that basically provides an up-down vote system based on card user interface motif that can be integrated with GitHub and directly map GitHub issues into places where these things can be commented on or upvoted and downvoted. He set up a demo at ietf.canny.io with a single issue attached to it so that people on this call could get a feel for what that might look like and what it would require of the community to participate. I'll note one thing is that it requires creating an account with the Canny.io, either by way of Facebook, GitHub, one of these other shared already existing identity servers, or providing an email password sign in with them to create an account. At that point, you can click up buttons and down buttons and add comments. So it would add another place where we would want to curate information flow into our planning. So the question for this group is that particular service an acceptable way to get this kind of feedback? Is this addressing what Roman's concern for getting a broader bit of community feedback looks like?
Can we just, Robert, sorry to interrupt, I just want to jump back a step, because the concern, and I'm sure Roman can jump in here, is whether or not the tools team priorities are reflecting community priorities, and what sort of evidence we have for that, so that we can point, so that someone can say that objectively. Now, so far, we've been working off basically two mechanisms. One is having GitHub issues, and the second have been these two tools calls, this communicating with the community and sharing priorities and those type of things, and sharing the work details here. Now, so the question is whether or not the current mechanisms are sufficient, or whether or not we need an additional mechanism that lets us particularly look down at individual issues or individual larger chunks of things to see whether things are being missed, and the Canny.io is a suggested way forward in terms of that, because it allows the upvoting. So if any, I would love to hear from all of you, but we want to talk really about the prioritization, and are we meeting priorities? Are there concerns about that? And is this a good way to get better to that?
Yeah, my only observation, and I really do want to hear kind of other folks' feedback, is if we think the tools calls, for example, is a lot of feedback and interactive, I would observe, with no data, just this call, this meeting, if you subtracted everyone from the iStar, everyone from the LLC staff, and all the contractors, there would not be a lot of people on this call. And so to think that this is representative of the community, to me, would be kind of a tough sell. I don't know who reads the mailing list, the transcripts, or the YouTubes, or the rest of it, but this seems like a narrow slice of the community. And that's why I was kind of pushing, is there some better way? And I appreciate kind of this exploration. Over.
I will note that we normally have more, but yeah, I guess I'm the community. Yeah.
So, Russ, what do you think about a tool like this?
I think that yes, no is really difficult for what you're trying to get, which is, do we have the prioritization right? So I think a mail list discussion would be superior.
Okay. Right, so we need to take this whole conversation to the mailing list for a conversation. And I think perhaps we can promote these meetings a little bit better as well. We should offer free virtual cakes or something.
Yeah, Miria, we're not using the queuing. Just jump in, please.
Okay, so I put something in the chat, but I do wondering if we need community consensus for tool development, basically. I think we need to make sure we get the input from those people who are impacted by the tooling. And maybe most of them are in the call, probably, maybe not all of them, but like trying to reach out to the whole community, I'm not even sure that's a good idea. Maybe we should discuss that first. I mean, I think this call wouldn't work if we would have 200 people here.
Right.
I do think with a tool like this, we run exactly the same danger as we have with these meetings. If we only have 3 members of the community use it and they upvote their pet projects and nothing else, then we end up with a very distorted understanding of the priorities about things. So I do take Russ's point that we need to unpick this a lot more via the mailing list.
All right. So perhaps more focus on mailing list, focus on the roadmap, as just to unwrap this just maybe a hair more with the people that we do have here. Has the GitHub card style roadmap that is linked at the top of the notes been a useful way of communicating what the priorities are for what we're planning to work on, and ensuring that we're capturing the right prioritization from even the users here?
So I've been following tools for like longer than most anybody on this call, right? And to me, there's this context that I already have. And so I can't tell whether that's an effective tool for somebody who's coming to look for the first time. But I find the agenda for this call far more enlightening.
Maybe let me say something from the IAB's perspective, even so I'm not an IAB liaison here or whatever. But I think for me, it was actually a little bit hard the last 4 years to figure out like when something will happen, if it happened, how it was prioritized, and so on. So there is still some room for improvement, I think. But I also think having the minutes, and having this all transparent and public helped a lot.
All right. Well, if people have other thoughts, throw them at us on the list. Let's work through to see what we can do better. The remainder of the call is mostly FYI. 2 points that I wanted to highlight in particular were that work is continuing on ensuring that the Metaco client has utilities for the people who are chairing a session to place any participants that are being particularly disruptive into an observer-only mode, and that those changes will be available towards the end of the month, so that we have time to develop training around them before we get to 120. We also recently added a capture replacement. It's more than just a capture replacement, but a series of defense against automated abuse to the forums on www.ietf.org using Cloudflare's Managed Challenge Service. That we'll get some runtime with it. We believe it's going to make a significant difference to the amount of hassle that the Secretariat in particular has to deal with when someone decides to be abusive at those endpoints. The we've got the usual updates on the primary applications below. If anybody has any questions on those, we're happy to discuss them.
Oh, on the one about disruptive people, there's actually there are a set of features being exposed through Meet Echo there. So Meet Echo have a fairly detailed structure of permissions and roles, and a number of changes have been agreed with the IESG, and they're implementing those to give working group chairs and others a much more degree of control for various different situations. So, you know, the immediately disruptive person, the repeatedly disruptive person, the all sorts of things. So that set will be in place relatively soon. It will be included in the training and the documentation for IETF 120.
Yeah, and I just underscore that we are anticipating much more proactive prompting people to take that training to be so that they can be informed. So we'll step things up there.
And by the way, regarding the chair being able to push out somebody during the Meet Echo, is it also applicable for the working group delegates and AD, or just the chair?
Yes. There was a two-part question. So yes, it is appropriate for the others, and it's not. You can't push them out. As far as I know, you force them into observer mode. And
okay, yeah, whatever. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, thank you.
And if they are, and just to understand, if they're disruptive in terms of that they continue to request the permission to speak, for example, there's another action you could take as well. I can't remember what it is. So, you know, some thought's been put into it.
Thank you.
All right. So we have a few minutes left if anyone has any other business. No, thanks everyone for your time. I appreciate the effort that goes into having these discussions and making what we're doing for the community better. I expect to have a session in July, and then hopefully we will see everyone in Vancouver.
Thank you for your leadership, Robert.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks for the whole tools team. Bye.